So I talked a little bit about melanin and the effects that it has on our bodies, and why they want to suppress that in us. Now I want to bring it a little bit closer to home. Here in New York City, we have specialized testing. I think there's about 8 specialized high schools. And so there's been a bit of a controversy going on about this testing. And as always, I'm going to bring you a point of view that I thought was interesting and different. Okay, so the first thing I want to get into is this is a podcast that had some accounts, that firsthand accounts of students that were accepted to specialized high schools and what they had to go through to get there. Now, I think one student is Latina. I don't believe she's black, or she's not claiming to be black because she didn't say she was. And the other girl, she said she was Jewish. Okay, so I want you to just listen to their accounts of what trying to get into a specialized high school is like.
At Elite Academy in Flushing or A Plus Academy in Sunset Park, you'll see middle schoolers sitting in compact, feverish rooms working on linear equations and logical reasoning problems, hoping, praying for the chance to attend one of the city's 8 specialized high schools.
I would go, during the school year, every Saturday and Sunday at first for 4 hours each day.
This is Catherine Sanchez, a rising senior from the Bronx, describing the prep she did as a 7th grader to get ready for the SHSAT.
Towards the end of the school year, I started picking up more. So Fridays, I think from 5 to 8. And over the summer, it was basically 5 days a week.
For how long?
Probably a good 3 to 4 hours every day. A lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot of hours. That's 15 hours.
Mm-hmm.
A week.
In the summer.
In the summer. She took the specialized high school exam, but the odds of getting in were not in Catherine's favor, especially when you consider the middle school she came from.
Majority Hispanic, majority black. We didn't have any clubs. We had newspaper, but that was about it. Maybe 3 sports teams.
In the Bronx, there are entire neighborhoods that, some years, don't send a single student to specialized high schools. But Catherine wanted to go to Stuyvesant. Her 8th grade teacher told her that no students from the school had gone to Stuyvesant in 2 decades.
I'm a Hispanic woman from the Bronx, and I'm trying to get into Sty. It's not realistic, whatever. So be it,
Catherine's mom enrolled her in a test prep center called Mamoon's Tutorial.
I was the only, Hispanic kid in the class.
Many SHSAT prep centers are located in predominantly Asian neighborhoods. Catherine's was no exception.
There was the Bengali flag in the room. It was in the basement. There was at least 60 people in that room, and it's really only meant to be for 20.
When she first started going to Mamoon's, Catherine's practice exam scores were very low.
I got a 30 in English and an 8 in math. I remember that so clearly. And I was just watching him for the next 2 hours, solve these equations and apply these theorems, and I was like, what the hell is X? It was so challenging to be I'm in the honors class, or I'm supposed to be really smart in comparison to majority of my grade, and I don't know what this is.
Catherine said it felt unfair to be receiving instruction that her peers at school weren't, but she stuck with it. Her practice scores kept climbing. And on test day, in the fall of 8th grade, she took the exam, listed Stuyvesant as her top choice, and waited anxiously for the results. We're going to return to Catherine's story in a bit. First,
Okay, so a couple of things I want you to pay attention to. I want you to pay attention to the fact that she said that the test prep centers are in predominantly Asian communities. Okay, that's number one. I want you to also pay attention to the fact that Catherine was top of her class in her school. She was on track to be valedictorian in her school. And she still needed all of that prep. Let's keep going.
I'm going to introduce you to Charlotte Rich-Jack. Charlotte's also a freshman. She grew up in Washington Heights.
It's a very mixed community, so there's a lot of Jewish people, which I am, a big Dominican community, there's a large African American community.
Her parents enrolled her in the local elementary school.
But by the time I was in 4th grade, it was time for me to go. I was just very bored academically. I wasn't being challenged. I was the type of kid who could wake up at 8 o'clock, do my homework by 8:15, and be at school by 8:30. So my parents switched me to the Spire Legacy School, which is a small private school on 59th Street for advanced learners. My classes were 12 kids on average. The entire grade was 25.
Tuition at Spire is $43,500 a year. That's above the median annual income in the Bronx.
Specialized high schools weren't looked at as the dream schools at my school at all. They were your backups. They were what you went to if you didn't get into the privates.
Still, Charlotte says most of her classmates, including her, took the specialized high school exam.
I took a practice test the day after I got out of school in 7th grade.
After that,
Tutoring sessions and more diagnostics, and I wouldn't say that I did a ton of work to get in because I also had a pretty good middle school education, but I definitely did prep for it.
you're probably starting to get a sense of how resources influence who gets into specialized high schools.
What I want you to pay attention to here is Charlotte said that as she got bored, her parents put her in a different school. Now, I've seen this for myself with students who other people looked at as misbehaving, not too rambunctious for the class, all over the place, maybe even talking back, But what happened when the parent took her son out of the school and she put him in a school that had like all these kind of like electronics or something or other. And the boy flourished because he was in an environment that stimulated him and, that was interesting to him, and he was able to learn, and he wasn't constantly trying to find things to do while in class because he was very stimulated by the actual classroom. Now, I had run into a lady one time, and she was telling me about her daughter. Her daughter was about 5 or 6 years old, and her daughter was having the same issues. Like, she was just talking too much in class. She wasn't paying attention. And I told her, your child is bored. Maybe you need to give the child extra work if you can't, put your child at a different school, but your child is bored. And a few weeks later, she came to me and told me, you were right, that she had, I think she got her put into a different classroom or something or other. Somehow she was able to, or gave her some more work or something. She was able to solve the problem, but the answer to the solution wasn't that the little girl was bad or she was trying to cause trouble. It was that she was bored, okay? So I just want you to keep that in mind, especially when it comes to our black boys, but our girls too get bored now. Come on. Now that we moved on to that, I want to talk about Charlotte. Now, Charlotte said that her school was $43,000 a year. Now, how equal can it be when to get into the school, you need a prep? You need to go to a school to prepare you for the prep. And then the prep, as we saw, or I don't know if we got to that part already, but the prep is like $2,000 or something like that for the summer. $2,500, $3,500, something like that. So you see how expensive this prep is. How equal is it? Okay. She said there was 12 students in her class. You see how important class sizes are, and 25 students in the grade. She also said that specialized high schools were not a goal in her community. They were a backup. That's our goal.
You are rewarded more for extremely high scores on one section than you are for very high scores on both sections.
It's kind of weird. You have a better chance of getting in if you get 100 on one section and a 60 on the other than if you get a 90 on both.
So the test is 114 questions, 57 math, 57 verbal, all but 5 are multiple choice. You have 90 minutes to do each section, which is about a minute and a half per question.
After 13 months of test prep at a cost of about $2,500, Catherine did well enough on the exam to get into Stuyvesant.
Once I did prove myself, people were like, oh my god, so smart, I knew you'd get in. I was like, okay.
I met Catherine in the fall through Caliber, Stuyvesant's literary magazine. As she is 2 years ahead of me, I've looked to her for advice on the upcoming years. I asked Catherine to describe her experience walking into Sty for the very first time.
Here I was, walking with my, totally dark cousin to school, and she was like, no one here looks like us, and I was like, yeah. And it was just, terrifying, truly mortifying.
You heard supposed to be the smart kids of New York City, but that's definitely not what plays out. It's definitely more which kids whose parents have the money to pay for resources.
Oftentimes in conversations about diversity, the focus is on providing access and opportunity to underprivileged students. But Charlotte says the lack of diversity is also harming privileged students.
My school's dead in the center of the Bronx, and there are all these kids from the Upper West Side that take private bus services to get to school. So they take Valo to school, they have their specialized education, they take a private bus service home to the Upper West Side. They have no sense of the real world. Like, New York City to them is going to my perfect school in the middle of nowhere and then going back to Manhattan.
And if I had my way, there would not be a single test. I don't even understand why Albany gets to decide anything about our specialized high schools to begin with. This should be a local decision.
He brings up this legal barrier.
Are you talking about the state law?
Yeah, exactly. Back in 1971, when civil rights groups started pressing the chancellor, a guy named Harvey Scribner, on the lack of diversity in specialized schools, the state legislature responded by throwing together a bill that enshrined the single test admissions policy in state law. And it's still in the books today.
You know, I still can't get over that. How the state could decide local school admissions policy.
And the real irony is that there were way more Black and Hispanic students at specialized high schools in the 1970s than there are today.
So Taylor.
So I want you to peep how they passed the bill in the 70s, which I'm sure was a result of the civil rights movement in the 60s. It was part of that affirmative action thing to try to make it, the specialized high schools, more diverse, that fake word diverse, and more fair, right? To letting in more Black students, right? And it worked at first, but it took them 50 years to perfect it. And now we're barely getting any in at all. Don't you think that's interesting? I also want you to see, now look at the next video. I want you to see who is big mad and who's hot as fish grease. And I want you to tell me once again that we got allies.
And racism! And racism! And racism!
They never had this problem when Stuyvesant was all white. They never had this problem when Stuyvesant was all Jewish. Now all of a sudden they see it one too many Chinese and they say, hey, it's not right.
How do you get into those specialized high school? By studying, studying, and studying.
Learn to serve the Black and Hispanic kids in your own public schools first before messing with the seating of 3,000 kids.
Okay, so I want you to peep how that bill was created and passed to combat the discrimination that Black people encountered in education, in the education process. It took them 50 years to perfect the system to push us out, where they dumbed down our students with the schools, they boosted up the test, and then gave their students, outside test prep. Okay, so now I want you to peep that the people that are big mad, upset, hot as fish grease, that bill wasn't even put in place to protect those people. And this is why we say tangibles 2020, because they get us with the trick bag of helping minorities. It helps all the minorities except for us. And see how the other minorities, they like, oh, well, we don't care that y'all can't get in. Fix y'all stuff. We don't care. You're going to hurt us. And we don't care about you. But they in that school because of us fighting for equality in the 60s. I just want you to keep that in mind. Now, I don't know whether we should do away with the test or not, but what I do know is no matter what we do, they are always going to move that goalpost. So I'm going to ask you a question. What are we going to do?